Hello Melissa, my name is Paul. I saw your video, Take Me Home With You, a few months ago, but I lost it and only just found it. So I now have the opportunity to respond to your video. I sent you an email and I don't know if you ever got it or simply never responded, so I've decided to make a video response to your video. First of all, you point out that you did at one point have a crush on this guy, but the two of you were in relationships with other people, so it wasn't possible. So I think that you probably have at some point given him an implication that you liked him in a way that may have indicated that he might have had the opportunity with you to have something more than just a platonic relationship. Now, I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but consider, is it possible that you gave him some signal at some point that if you weren't involved with someone else, there might be a chance for him? If it is possible you gave him that as a sign, he may have held on to it as a thought, waiting for the opportunity. So when it turns out that apparently neither of you are in a relationship, he makes a pass at you, and this upsets you enough that you cried about it. I can take it as one of two ways. The pass was so crude that it insulted you, or you were insulted because apparently you put him on a pedestal and considered him a safe guy who was in the let's just be friends category, who you considered would never be interested in you. You point out that you felt ashamed by what he did. This seems to imply that you see something bad about sex, and see sex as something disgusting or immoral. In a way, I guess I can understand. Maybe 14 years ago I was having a conversation over email with a guy who was gay, who happened to say that he'd be interested in me if the opportunity came up. Now, if he had made the comment, maybe 5 years before that, I would probably have been so homophobic that I've gone ballistic and used all sorts of profanity and insults. I've matured over the years. I simply told him that I'm only interested in women, but I didn't take it as an insult. It did not bother me, because I've learned something about sex which I'd like to point out. When someone indicates they find you interesting sexually, it is not an insult. It is the highest possible compliment one person can pay another. Unless that person has no standards at all and would sleep with anyone and cares nothing about themselves, for that person to find you attractive is an admission of your value to them. Now, you indicate you've known this guy for several years. Clearly, I think if he thought of you as some cheap floozy, either he would never have asked you at all, or if he was the type to go after that sort of woman, would have hit on you a long time ago, perhaps, possibly as soon as he met you. Let me now take a look and see if there were other clues to tell him that you would not be insulted if he propositioned you. First of all, since you mentioned that you have had a boyfriend, this implies you're not a virgin, and thus the idea of sex with some guy that you know is not out of the question. Given the factors of what you described, the fact that you admit that you have had a crush on him too at some point may have given him an idea that you might be receptive to him if he made an advance. I'm not saying you did, but sometimes people unconsciously give tells that indicate their opinions. It's how a professional interrogator like a police officer gets an idea when someone is lying. So maybe it is possible he got an idea there was a chance, and in a moment of weakness, or without thinking about how to approach it correctly, he made a pass at you that you considered crude. And your comments indicate that it wasn't that he made a pass at you. You realize you are somewhat attractive and guys will try to hit on you. What bothered you was that a guy that you tagged as safe did so. The guy didn't know the code that most women have internalized without saying because they think guys know it. When a woman says to a guy, let's just be friends, or puts him in that category, what she's actually saying is, I will never have sex with you and you're kidding yourself if you think otherwise. So consider this for a moment. A lady he knows, who is not now in a relationship and also has had a crush on him, who isn't averse to having sex with a man if she knows him, is there and might be available if he asks her. So he does, and she goes ballistic. So he apologizes because he didn't know the code and smashed the unstated pedestal you put him on. Obviously, you put him on a pedestal because when he admitted his true feelings for you, you then classified him as just another disgusting man interested in only one thing. It has been several months. I do not know if you ever were able to forgive him for his failure to read your mind and live up to the standards he didn't know you expected him to meet, because apparently you weren't sure his apology was enough to make up for his, quote, unforgivable sin, unquote. Whether or not you choose to ever forgive him for his faux pas is your decision. But just realize that I suspect, from what you've said about him, that he wasn't just picking you as some target for tonight, one-night stand, or casual fling. It's probably clear he's had feelings for you for a long time. I think you overreacted, but it is your choice to feel in whatever fashion you think is appropriate. If you haven't already, perhaps you should take that into account and think about it. Now, if you at some point made it clear that you no longer had a crush on him, or otherwise indicated that you had no interest in him that way, that's a different matter, and maybe your feeling bad about how he acted would have been appropriate. But think about it for a moment. Could you have potentially given him signals that indicated it when you had a crush on him? If it was when he was unavailable, or you were, would it have been reasonable for him to think that maybe there might be something there if at some point in the future things changed? I do not know you personally. It is entirely possible you never gave any hints or signals to him that you felt attracted to him, and thus it is entirely possible you read him wrong. But I think the worst thing about this is that if it had been some random guy who came on to you, you would have shrugged it off as the typical practice of some horny male acting toward an attractive woman. You have, in effect, assigned to him a badge of disgrace and shame for the same conduct that you would have shaken off in some guy you didn't know. You're making a friend suffer punishment for misconduct that you would have considered normal or ignored in a complete stranger. Does this make any sense?